for someone. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining Thursday night class. We're going to begin today a new discourse. This is going to be a discourse for Sefirot to Omer, which is the time that we're counting the Omer. This is the time between Pesach and Shavuos. And this is a discourse, one of my favorite discourses. Now, I've taught a lot of discourses, but this remains one of my favorites. And I've taught, and we've learned this. And I learned this again today, and I said, wow, I wish I can teach this again, but then I got frustrated because I remember that I taught it already. I don't like to teach things twice. So then I went back on YouTube, and I was looking for this class. And I saw that I didn't teach it at least in the last 5, 6, 7 years. So by that time, I think it's time for a renewal. We can learn it again. But it's definitely somewhere on our website. I have to find it, but I definitely taught it. But second time is better than the first. It's an awesome discourse. We're calling the class the Symbiosis between body and soul, Jew and Gentile, or Gentile and Jew. It has to do with the interplay of the soul and the body, the magnificent gain that the soul gets by descending into the world of the body and elevating the body, working with the body, although it's a painful descent for the soul. The motivation the soul has to descend into the body, to work with the body. Ultimately, it reveals the superiority of the body over the soul. And that's why the soul in the end lifts the body to heights. The body lifts the soul to places that the soul couldn't even imagine. And that not only is the soul, does the soul gain by being triggered by the body. We're going to learn there's 2 levels over here. One is that the body triggers the soul and therefore elevates the soul to a much higher place. Another way is not that the body triggers the soul, but the body actually itself has something that the soul is lacking. And therefore the body itself forever acts as an elevator of the soul. The body itself is an elevator of the soul. In addition to this, it also deals with, in general, the Jewish people and the Gentile world, which is close to the concept of soul and body. Because Israel, the Jewish people, are the more spiritual dynamic of creation of the world. The nations are the body. It's not exactly the same, as we're going to learn in the discourse, but there is a continuous gain that both the soul gets from being in the body and the Jewish people have by living amongst the Gentile nations and eventually bringing the Gentile world also into the Messianic experience. And the state of how things will be for Jew and Gentile in the Messianic era. And this has very much to do with the time of Sefirot to Omer, because Sefirot to Omer, which is the time between Passover and Shavuos, is a time when we work on rectification of our more animal side, which relates more to the body. That's why every single day we work on another midah, on another emotion, and another aspect of our unrefined consciousness. So we're paying particular attention to the side of ourselves that need rectification. So this Maimer is basically going to cover the entire spectrum of everything, because it's going to take us deep into the world of Mashiach, based on the current struggle, what's happening right now, and it visits all the elements that make up our life, both body and soul, Jew and Gentile, nations and Israel, and so on and so forth. The discourse was delivered on Shabbos Pasha Shmini, which is this Shabbos, in the year 1968, which is the year 5728. That year, Rosh Chodesh Iyar, which is going to happen next month, second month in the Jewish calendar, Rosh Chodesh Iyar, which is going to happen next week, that year it fell out on a Sunday. And the custom is that when Rosh Chodesh, which is the beginning of the new Jewish month, falls out on Sunday, we read a special Haftorah, a special portion of the prophet on that Shabbos that does not relate to the Torah portion, but rather relates to the idea that day is Erev Rosh Chodesh, which means a day before the Rosh Chodesh, which is a passage from Samuel 20, in which it talks about a very intense moment that King David had in his life when David was trying to ascertain if he's in danger. We know that King David was pursued by his father-in-law. Saul, the first Jewish king, did not like the fact that his kingdom would not continue on to his children, but rather his son-in-law, who he saw as more like an outsider, although it was his son-in-law, would be the heir to his kingdom. And it was because of a punishment to him, because he did something wrong, and Samuel had rebuked him and told him that God said, I'm going to rip away the kingdom, I'm going to give it to a fellow that's better than you, which basically was his son-in-law, King David. King David at that time was not sure. He had this creepy feeling in his soul that his father-in-law is out to get him. Till that point, there wasn't any open hostility from Saul against David, from Shaul against David. So this particular portion of the Haftorah is an event that describes how King David made a covenant with his brother-in-law, who is King Saul's son, who is technically the crown prince, but is not going to be the next king. Usually the crown prince means he's the heir to the throne, but he's not going to be the crown prince because his brother-in-law is going to take the kingdom, King David. Yet, Jonathan, who's the son of Saul, loves King David and has all the admiration for him. And he decides to be the middleman between his father and his brother-in-law. And he's going to investigate, because King David says to him, I smell something fishy. I don't like the feelings I'm getting, the vibes I'm getting from your father. And Yonason says to him, what are you talking about? My father is perfectly okay with you. And if he would be against you, he would have said something to me. And King David says, no, I can sense it in my bones. He wants to hurt me. So that between the two of them, King David and Yonason set up a test. That test was going to be played out on Rosh Chodesh, on the day of the new moon. I'm going to speak about that in a moment. We're going to get to that. I just want to connect it why we read this Haftorah. They set up this test. And in that trial, there is going to be something which can possibly upset the king regarding David. And they were going to test the king's reaction, of what kind of a reaction, if he has negative feelings towards King David or not. That was going to be the test. So Yonason, or Jonathan, says to David HaMelech, to King David, tomorrow is going to be the new month, Machar Chodesh, and we're going to do this test. And we're going to go over it soon, what that test was. So, because he begins that statement with the idea tomorrow will be Rosh Chodesh, so every Erev Rosh Chodesh, which means every time Shabbos, Saturday, comes out on the day before Rosh Chodesh, which means Rosh Chodesh is on a Sunday, we suspend the regular reading of the Haftorah, which is usually related to that particular Torah portion that we read, and we read this special Haftorah called Machar Chodesh. So the year the Rebbe said this discourse was one such year that Rosh Chodesh Iyar was on Erev Rosh Chodesh. And the Rebbe bases this incredible, phenomenal, deep, layers upon layers upon layers of opening up the deepest mysteries of existence and revealing to us such incredible insight, all all deduced from this story, the internal, the inner essence of the dialogue between David and Yonason, and how this is relevant to our lives and what this really means. Now, the Rebbe is going to base this discourse on a discourse said by his the Rebbe is not a great grandson, but through marriage he was a great grandson of his great grandfather. That would be the Rebbe Marash. The Rebbe Marash, the fourth Chabad Rebbe, whose birthday is the second day of the month of Iyar. And that's probably why the Rebbe was saying the discourse on this Shabbos and basing it on this particular Rebbe's discourse, because the Rebbe was connecting it to, the Rebbe would always celebrate his predecessors' birthdays and special days. So in connection to the Rebbe Marash's birthday, Reb Shmuel was actually Shmuel, where this whole story is recorded in the book of Samuel, which is Shmuel. And the Rebbe bases it on that discourse on the very same words that the Rebbe Marash said many years earlier. I don't know exactly which year. But the Rebbe Marash said it not on the Shabbos before the month of Iyar. The Rebbe Marash said it, means the fourth Rebbe said it, on the Shabbos that fell out before Rosh Chodesh, also a same type of a setting, a Machar Chodesh Shabbos, where Shabbos was when Rosh Chodesh was on Sunday. So therefore the Haftorah was, but it was not the month of Iyar, because this can happen many months of the year, it can happen any month of the year. That particular year that the Rebbe Marash said the discourse, it was Shabbos, which was the day before Rosh Chodesh, Sivan, which is going to be the next month. Now this might seem just like a little thing. The Rebbe says the discourse on Erev Rosh Chodesh, Shabbos Iyar. And the Rebbe Marash says the discourse on Shabbos Mevorchim, the Shabbos that's before Erev Rosh Chodesh, Sivan, which is the third month. The Rebbe is saying. But the Rebbe takes that very same idea, the difference if it's Erev Rosh Chodesh Sivan or Erev Rosh Chodesh Iyar in the dynamic of this whole story. So this also feeds into the incredible, intricate mosaic. This is literally a mosaic in this discourse of just absolutely stunning. And there's one particular gem that spoke to me very particularly in this discourse that's like off the charts. What I'm saying off the charts is that it's literally there is a breakthrough in this discourse on something about the material physical world. Particularly, I'm gonna tell you already a little bit now, is that why the time of Mashiach is going to be a time where there is going to be so much material blessings and material delights and pleasure, which would seem to be so out of character for a time that we're filled with the knowledge of God. So the Rebbe is going to explain that the relationship of the body to the physical pleasures are not just due to the coarseness of the body. It's such a messianic way of looking at things. It's absolutely stunning that the relationship of the body to the physical delights of the world is not just something to do with the fact that, because of our lowliness and we're distant from God, so we don't know of better pleasure, then we would say that in the days of Mashiach, when we are highly, highly sensitive, we would lose that taste. We would lose that appreciation. But the Rebbe is going to, in this particular discourse, find meaning in that great wealth and in that great abundance of material blessing on a quintessential deep level. So it was really interesting. This is particularly related to Malchut, which is a feminine element. Because from the world of masculinity, which the soul is the soul versus the body is male and female. From the soul's perspective, the body is totally messed up with its physical attachments. And when you're coming from a very, very masculine soul, we might say conservative Jewish view, not futuristic, but old-time Jewish view, we have to deal the best with our physicality and our body and so on and so forth. But it's mainly a hindrance and an impediment. We fixed that a few weeks ago. An impediment on our divine service. Definitely not where it's at. But from the female element, from the feminine element of from the world of Malchut, which is the creation, the world, that's where we come to the insight that when the physical will be very pure in the days of Mashiach and the impure will be removed from it and there's no more evil inclination, the physical experiences themselves will be very godly. And why I got so excited today was because last night I took my wife out to dinner. So we were in a restaurant after Pesach, and dinners, you get nice food. And we had a conversation about the materialism of the physical world. And I was feeling the friction between the Jewishness, the holiness, where our hearts and minds should be in, and the coarseness in discussing with the waiter how good the burger was. After I finished discussing with the waiter, who was a Spanish guy, about how good the burger was, I started looking at myself and I thought to myself, what am I, like a cow over here? I'm teaching Hasidus and I'm talking to the waiter about how the burger was. I was telling him what happened to me, was complimenting it was a good burger. And I was feeling like really yucky in a sense. And I guess, and my wife looks at me and she says, but the Jewish people, we never had physical delights. We were always oppressed. We hardly had anything. If you had a strawberry, it was nice. You had we didn't have. And today, there's such abundance. There's such delights. And there's so many nice places. And there's so many beautiful things to see. And we have access to travel and to see and to experience in this. She says, can we really say that this is just Hashem doesn't want us to have any of this? Then why is it revealing itself right at the time of Mashiach? And I knew she's right, but I just wasn't comfortable with it. And even though I taught the idea many times already, but still, at the moment, I was feeling like... And then when I learned the mimer today, I jumped up and I ran to tell her. Look at you. You're light years ahead of me. Light years ahead. But there's that line in this mimer where the Rebbe raises the physical and the material world. But again, it's not to be made into a mistake that the moment we fall into gluttony, the moment we lose it all. But the essential idea that there is so much abundance and there's so much available and that the world has become so rich for people now in our times and the abilities to it should not be seen as just a test. To a certain degree, it is a test. And we should be very careful not to become controlled by it in any which way possible. But it does not mean that it does not have an incredible godly value. To a certain degree, it actually creates the ambiance for all the spiritual godliness that's going to be in the days of Mashiach. In its endless heights, the ambiance of it, the setting of it, is in a physical material world with physical pleasure and physical delight. So there's something really amazing about that. So that's just a little peek into the discourse. where we're going with this. But again, the women are right. And here we go. Lo Yonason v'achar chodesh. Lo Yonason says to David, Machar chodesh, tomorrow is going to be chodesh. Tomorrow is going to be the new. So by the way, this year, Rosh Chodesh is Monday, not Sunday. So Shabbos is not this, but still, this is good reading anytime. But it is going to be this coming month. This, okay. So it's Samuel 1. Okay, there's two books of Samuel. So Samuel 1, chapter 20, verse 18. It says like this. So Yonatan says to David, to David HaMelech, Machar Chodesh, tomorrow is going to be Chodesh, is going to be the new moon. You're going to be absent. Sorry, you're going to be remembered because your seat is going to be vacant. Your seat is going to be vacant. It's going to be an absence. What's the story? So going back to King David, okay? As I mentioned earlier, King David is telling him, I have vibes that I'm getting. I'm feeling negative energy from your father, and I'm scared for my life. Yonason first tells him, don't worry, I don't know of anything like this. My father's okay with you. But King David tells him, trust me, I sense it. So David HaMelech was the one who originally makes the suggestion. I didn't read up on this. I've taught this earlier, but I never really got the backstory. I didn't go back. This time I went back a little bit to see the earlier part of the story. And that's where King David says to Yonason already the origin of the idea. He says to him, listen here, let's test it. We're going to test the waters as follows. There's going to be a festive, let's wait for a time where there's going to be a festive feast at the royal table. And obviously as a son-in-law and as part of the royal family, I'm invited to that feast. But I'm going to intentionally be absent. That's going to provoke your father to ask where I am. You are going to say to your father that David spoke to me, that David HaMelech, King David, wasn't the king at that point yet. David spoke to me and asked me permission to leave because he has a family affair of his own family. And Zevach Mishpacha, they were doing some kind of a festival, some kind of a whatever, family simcha, whatever it is. And therefore, he asked me permission if he can go, and I gave him permission. And now you're going to watch your father's reaction. If he's going to say good, because the fact that David he didn't speak to not everything you have to bring up to the king. The king shouldn't be bothered by everybody, but you speak to the crown prince. It's not like he left without telling anybody. He notified that he's not going to be there. So if your father has no grudge against me, he'll accept that and everything will be fine. But if he'll go into a rage and you'll see from his answer that he's getting upset and angry and so on and so forth, then you'll see that he's because he's really angry. I mean, this will serve as a trigger. It'll trigger and then you'll get will draw out from him the secret. If he really hates me and despises me and he's just controlling it. We're going to see. So that was the idea that they said. Then here Yonason sets it up and he says, okay, Yonason takes the idea, the kernel of the idea, Jonathan, and he develops it a little more. He says, how am I going to communicate to you? I can't see if I'm going to come and speak to you directly, I can get myself killed. for spilling the king's secrets. So we have to set up some kind of a code that I can notify you if you're in danger. So he says to him like this: you will go, you will hide for 3 days at a certain place next to a certain stone. This is the place that you once did, whatever. We're going to go through the certain area you will hide. And, let me read to you the words from the Navi itself. So like, we don't have to like this. It's going to make more sense as we read it. So give me a second over here. Shmuel Aleph, Perek Chaf. Okay. He says like this: Lo Yonason mocha chodesh. Tomorrow is going to be the new moon. On Rosh Chodesh, there used to be a festive meal by the king. Maybe they couldn't, because that was the korban of Rosh Chodesh was only eaten by Kohanim in the Beit HaMikdash, but still they had a Rosh Chodesh meal. And he said, "V'nifkadeta, you're going to be remembered." Why? Because King David had a seat that he would usually sit by at the royal table. That seat will be empty. So my father will ask about you. Again, as I said before, this was originally King David's idea, but now Yonason is putting it into action. And then he says to David like this: "V'shilashta, you should wait 3 days. Tered ma'oid, go down. Basically meant lay low, remain hidden. Tered ma'oid means, shilashta means wait 3 days. Tered ma'oid, lay low. Ubasal ha'makom, you should come to a place, asher nistarta sham, that you've hidden over there, b'yom ha'maisa, on the day of action." Which has many interpretations. One of them means, b'yom ha'maisa means on a weekday, on a regular day that was not Rosh Chodesh. Because Rosh Chodesh is a day that's not called the day of action, because, they used to be careful not to do much work on Rosh Chodesh. It was like a little bit of a Yom Tov. But come back to the place that you were there, that we met, that we used to meet, or whatever, b'yom ha'maisa, on a regular day. The Yeshavta, you should sit hiding there in the tall grass or whatever, Eitzel Even Ha'azel, next to a Azel stone. Why it's called Even Ha'azel, I'm not exactly sure. But there's a certain stone over there. It was a known stone. Lay in waiting over there. I'm going to do the test that we spoke about earlier because my father's going to ask me about you. I'll see the reaction. And if his reaction, and then I'm going to come back to report to you, so you're going to know how to, if you need to escape or you're safe. So the way we're going to do this is like this. I'm going to come outside to that area and pretend that I am practicing archery. Okay? I'm going to be shooting arrows. And I'm going to shoot 3 arrows. And I'm going to shoot it not far from the stone where you are. Okay? And I'm going to make believe that I'm trying to hit a target, like somewhere there. I'm going to shoot three arrows off to the side. L'shalach li, to send it lematara, as if I'm shooting at a target. And then I'm going to have a lad with me. I'm going to have because he's the crown prince. He doesn't go out himself. He comes out with a servant, a youth. He's my assistant boy. So I'm going to say to this young youth, I'm going to say to him, and now listen very closely. What I'm going to yell to him. I'm going to tell him, go out and fetch the arrows. It's like you're playing golf and then you shoot the ball and you have to go fetch the ball. So I'm going to send this guy, this youth out. I'm going to send him. Once he leaves, I'm going to yell out to him. I'm going to tell him, hey, the arrows are you don't go so far. They're close. Or I'll say the arrows are from you and farther. If I say the arrows are from you went too far, it's closer, that will be a sign there's no danger. And then you, even David, you can get up right then and there and you can come and bring me the arrows and everything is good. But if I say to the lad, it's from, hey, go farther, it flew farther, then you will know that you got to get away. So then remain hiding, and then when we leave, you should run away, basically. In the end, it happened a little different. Because in the end, the story is that, yes, Saul does get very angry and has an explosive reaction, which obviously showed that he was really, really harboring a lot of, animosity to King David. And Jonathan Yonason comes out makes this test. But instead of him shooting and and he says it's going to be from there and farther. He waits. King David does not get up, remains hiding. Ultimately the youth, the lad, comes back with the arrows. And what Yonason does is he gives over the bow and all the arrows and the whole thing over to the young, and he says, go take him back to the palace. And he stays alone in the field. When he's alone in the field, King David comes out, and they meet and they talk and they kiss and they say goodbye to each other because they don't know if they'll ever meet again. And then King David knows that he's doomed, and he's going to be persecuted now for whatever. So they have a very emotional moment, and they're both crying, and it concludes that King David cries more than Yonason. That's the story. They say goodbye. Okay. So that's where the mimer is going to discuss the spiritual meaning, because obviously every story in the Torah, in addition to its physical element in this world, has a godly interpretation as it replies to the higher realms. So let's see what's happening. Yonason says to David, tomorrow is Chodesh. And if Kadata, you're going to be remembered, because your seat is going to be vacant. Umevi Admo Marash, Bal Yom Aledes, the Beis Iyar, the Rebbe Marash, the one whose birthday is on the second day of Iyar, brings B'mamare al Pasuk Zeh, on his discourse, which he said on this very verse, he brings what Rashi says. Masha Pirush Rashi al Pasuk. So Rashi says like this: V'nifkadeta, you're going to be V'nifkadeta. Rashi says Uloshen Zikaron, you're going to be remembered. How do we know V'nifkadeta is a Loshen Zikaron? Because we know the sign that God says to Moshe, the sign that Jacob, Yaakov, and Yosef gave to the Jewish people. They're going to go out of Egypt. Is pakod pakadati, which means you will be remembered. So pakida means to remember. V'nifkadeta means you will be remembered. Muloshen zikaron, that's v'nifkadeta. But then what does it say right after that? Why will you be v'nifkadeta? Why will you be remembered? Ki yipaked ma'ishavecha, because your seat will be vacant. So it's almost the same word. Soon he's going to ask the question: how can you have the same word? It means the opposite. V'nifkadeta, or why does he choose to use a word which, in the same context, which are total opposites? V'nifkadeta, which the root of the word is paked, means you will be remembered, and then yipaked means you will be absent. Absence is the opposite of being remembered. Remembered is being present. So when they're talking about you, absence means you're not here. So not being and yet being at the same time. It's a really cool thing. It's the same word. V'nifkadeta, you will be remembered, ki yipaked mashavecha, because your seat will be vacant. V'yipaked uloshen chisaron. U'pidish v'nifkadeta ki yipaked mashavecha. What does it mean you will be remembered because your seat will be vacant? Who? Da'yadeshi yipaked makay mashavesh al David. Through this, that the seat of David will be an empty seat. Through this, Shaul will remember him. And he continues in the Maimer. Why does it say the word v'nifkadeta and not v'niskarta? Again, the more common term for being mentioned is the word zechira, not pekida. Pekida works, but it's a less common term. Why does it use the word v'niskarta ki yotzei? So he brings a deep mystical explanation. V'nifkadeta hu gam loshin yichud. V'nifkadeta also comes from the meaning of the word yichud. Yichud means an intimacy. Koloshon Razal, as the sages say, Chayev Adam Lifkay des Ishtay. Sages say that there are certain times when a person is obligated to have intimacy with his wife. One of the times is before they travel. A person goes out of town, so the night before that, they're supposed to have intimacy with their wife. So they use the term lifkod. So you see the word pekida also means an intimacy. So in addition to the meaning over here that Shaul, King Saul, will remember David, will recall him, will ask about him, there's a meaning as well, a deeper meaning. But this only applies in the mystical realm. That what? That that Vinivkadata is hinting to a certain mystical intimacy between the supernal source of King Saul, Shaul HaMelech, and the supernal source of King David. The supernal source of David HaMelech, his spiritual energy, where he comes from, is the divine attribute of kingship, which is called the Shekhinah, which is the feminine side of God. The supernal source of Shaul HaMelech, of King Saul, is also in a feminine element, is in Bina. Bina is much higher than Malchut. King Saul was a very big tzaddik. He was a very righteous person. And he had a tremendous divine energy dwelling inside his neshama. For whatever reason, he lost the kingship, and for whatever reason, it needed to be Malchut, not Bina. Now, you can't have an intimacy between Bina and Malchut, because an intimacy between Bina and Malchus is both female. It's not an intimacy. An intimacy is supposed to be between male and female. So when he says over here there will be an intimacy between Vinivkadata, you will be remembered, it doesn't mean Shaul and David. It means somebody that Shaul is related to. What does that mean? Spiritually. Bina is called the mother of the children. She's the mother of the 6 divine emotions that are the masculine side of God. Because spiritually, in the dynamics of the Sefirot, God projects himself as male, and that is related to the 6 emotions of God called the Ze'er Anpin. The Ze'er Anpin are the 6 emotional attributes of God. And the female element of God is called Malchut. When there is a union between these energies, between the male and the female energies, this is this intimacy. So what this is hinting to over here, we'll soon see that this is going to open up incredible ideas. But let's first lay out the Kabbalistic outline, which might be a little bit still a little far-fetched, but it's gonna all make sense as we work it through. Is that what Yonatan is hinting to David HaMelech? Is he saying both you will be remembered, but on a deeper level, you, the Malchut, the Shekhinah, the feminine element of God, you will merit an intimacy. The 6 emotions of God, the level called HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the male element of God, will be intimate with you, which that means he will transmit to you a very deep transmission. That's what an intimacy is, from a man to a woman. So there will be a tremendous nifkadeta. There's going to be a yichud that's going to happen. Now, since the power from where the 6 emotions derive their energy is from the level of Bina, which is much, much higher. That's why it's as if it would be a unity between Shaul from Bina and David. It's not really Shaul, meaning it's not Shaul and David, because that would be 2 feminine energies, but it's from the son of King Shaul, which is technically Yonason, and David. Again, this is not talking about this is not on the physical plane. This is completely metaphysical in the spiritual realms above. As the energy is transmitted from the 6 emotions of God, which they are a derivative of Bina, and that's the meaning, v'nifkadeta, that King Saul will have a yichud with you. Doesn't mean Shaul HaMelech, it means the energies of Bina via the masculine emotions will be transmitted to where? Into Malchut. And that's what it uses. Now we're going to see soon. That idea that there's a yichud The reason why he's telling him this is going to happen tomorrow, because that happens on every Rosh Chodesh. Every Rosh Chodesh, what's Rosh Chodesh? Rosh Chodesh is the new moon. What does it mean, the new moon? The moon is always in the sky. What does it mean, a new moon? A new moon means that the moon is receiving the light of the sun, is shining on the moon, reflecting. Now, spiritually, the sun is male and the moon is female. It's like a supernal couple in heaven. In their spiritual origins, the moon is a metaphor or a physical representation of the Shekhinah of Malchut. And the sun is the physical representation of the transcendent masculine element of God, the level of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the male element of the divine, the infinite light. Every Rosh Chodesh, how does Rosh Chodesh happen? Is the moon receives light from the sun, which is the intimacy. So he's telling him tomorrow is going to be Chodesh, and that's when the intimacy takes place between male and female. And since David is the moon, meaning King David is represented by his moon. David was the 14th generation when it represents the moon being in the fullest, from Adam from Abraham, from Avram. Avram till David is 14 generations, it's a full moon. So King David represents the moon. That's why by Kiddush Levana we say David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kai. So the new moon is representing this unity, this fusion of the Ze'er Anpin and Malchut as they unify together. So let's read inside. Why does it say you will be remembered the Kiyotze Boy? Shenefkadeto gam loshin yichud, v'nefkadeto is also from the word yichud, it's a unity, Kolosh and Rezach Hayv L'Kisoi, Kishol hu bina. So the Rebbe Marash brings in his discourse that King Saul is the level of bina, the supernal level of bina, as we say. Why? What's the relationship of Shaul? K'moshe Kasav, like it says, Shaul merachai v'sanor. It's a pasuk in Bereshis, in Genesis, Parshas Vayishlach, and over there it mentions that there was this king named Saul. And by the way, it's not referring to King Saul, that our King Saul. It's referring to one of the ancient kings of Edom, whose name is Shaul. And he came from Rechovot HaNahar, from a broad river, from a place that's called Rechovot HaNahar. But in the mystical realm, we're not so limited by time and space. So if it mentions the name Shaul, and it connects this King Saul, even though it's referring to another King Saul, not even our King Saul, and it says that he comes from Rechovot HaNahar, this is also alluding to, this is a hint, that the Jewish King Saul, who's the first Jewish king, he comes from the river. Now the river is Bina. As we know that Chachma is called a spring. Chachma is the first of the 10 attributes. Chachma is a spring, and Bina is a river with a spring. Because what's Bina? Bina is taking a point of Chachma, a little kernel of revelation, and opening it up with a broad understanding. Bina is the expansion of the mind. That's the Bina. And in the divine realm, the divine attribute of Bina is called Nahar, the big Nahar Yotze Me'eden. We discussed it many times. So since it says Shaul Merachov V'Sanor, we learn from here that King Saul's root of his soul is from Bina. Bina means understanding. That's why we find that this was his power. He was had an incredible mind and an incredible understanding of godliness, but it was also his downfall. Because sometimes you get stuck in your head. And King Saul could not get out of his understanding. Because when he was told to wipe out Amalek, he remained in his calculations. He didn't listen. And that's why the kingdom was taken away from him, because he didn't listen to God. He made his own calculation. So that's always the danger of a big mind. The bigger the mind, the more a person sometimes can get stuck in their own mind and have a harder time of following directions if God who's commanding you and you have to surrender your mind completely, right? But that's Shol. Shol comes from the spiritual lights of Bina. And now who is Shol? Even though he himself is Bina, but he is the Shoresh, he is the root, as we said earlier, he is the mother, in a sense, of the midot, of the emotions. The 6 emotions, chesed, they come from, just like that we know that there's a lot of concepts over here. If I was to explain every concept over here, we would finish in 10 weeks. It's a lot of compact concepts over here. I'm assuming that there is some knowledge of the basics. The 6 emotions of Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes are called children, and they are children from, and ourselves also. Our emotions are children from our mind. So the Bina, which is the mother of our mind, Chachma is the father of our mind, Bina is the mother of our mind. She produces the children. She produces the emotions. So Shol is the mother of the Midot, which is the Ze'er Anpin, which is the masculine side of God, which is, like we said earlier, the sun. And how do we know that everything he brings a proof for? How do we know that Bina is the mother of the children? As it says, Mi bara ele. There's another verse in Isaiah. There's another pasuk in Isaiah where it says, lift up your eyes, and you should see Mi bara ela, who created these. Lift your eyes up and see who created these. Simply, it's who created these? Who created this magnificent creation? But in mysticism, in Kabbalah, there is another deeper meaning. Mi is Bina. Why is Bina called Mi? Mi means who? Number one, Chachma and Bina both are part of the concealed world. They're not revealed. God's emotions are revealed in creations. God's intellect is above the creation, hidden. It's called Alma Diskasia, the concealed world. So when something concealed, you say Mi, who? But there's another reason. Mi, the numeric value of Mi is 50. And we know Bina, in Bina, the number 50 is always in Bina. Bina is the 50 gates. Chamishim Share Bina, the 50 gates of Bina. So Bina is associated with 50. So Mi is Bina. Bara creates, means Bina is Bara, she is the source, she creates. Eila. Eila are these. Now these is the opposite of who. Who is, we don't know. These is when you're pointing with your finger. So it's referring to a level of the divine that you can point your finger to it. That's the divine emotion. Just like in a human being, your emotions spill out to the outside. Intellect is hidden, but emotions are, because emotions are excitement, like we discussed in our Mashiach class today, so they're more visible to the outside. They pour out. Even King Saul, who's Bina, who tries to hide his emotions, King David figures out over here, together with Jonathan, how to poke it to make it explode. The emotions can't always be contained. They come out. So Ela, which means these, referring to the emotions, also, Gematria. Here as well, we work with Gematria. Ela is 36. Aleph, Lamed, Hey, 36. How many primary male emotions are there? 6. Each of them have all the 6 inside of them, like we do by Sefirot to Omer. Chesed, Sheba, Chesed, Gevurah, Sheba, Chesed. So there are really 6 emotions, not counting the Malchut. 6 emotions, because Malchus is a sphere on her own. 6 emotions, 6 times 6 is 36. So Mi, Bara, Ela means Bina, which is Mi, Bara creates Ela, the 6 emotions. It's these 6 emotions making up the male element of the divine, who has an intimacy with the Malchut, with David, with the moon. Okay? So that's what he's saying. Mi, Bara, Ela, the Mi, Bina. Who are shayrish the Ela is the root of Ela Midos, which are the emotions. V'Davidu Malchus, and King David represents the Malchut element. That's why it says, V'nifkadeta, you will be remembered. In other words, instead of using the word V'nifkadeta, V'niskarta, you will be remembered, it uses a word that is also meaning, because remembrance is only remembering or recalling. But V'nifkadata means also coming to reveal to us that there is an intimacy here. Sheshol yifkay des David, that Shaul will be, simply it sounds like, that he will transmit to David. Hainu, what does that mean? Sheyichud, there will be a yichud za. Za is an acronym for Zeir Anpin, which refers to the male emotions of the divine. It's called Zeir Anpin. That will have a yichud sheshar shay mibina. Again, even though the yichud is from the Zeir Anpin, not from Shaul, not from Bina. Shaul is from Bina. But in this case, Shaul is the mother of, and therefore the cause of, the male, the boy, the son, who then has a union with Malchus. Shar Shay Mebina, Shaul, which is Shaul. Malchus David. So Shaul and Malchus are going to have on Rosh Chodesh an intimacy. That's the meaning. And this is the connection. So we understand that this all operates on a very deep, godly. The story is taking place both physically, but physically is the total opposite of an intimacy. He's ready to kill him. He hates him, right? It's the both. But in the higher realm, as the story is in its source of sources, it's representing a v'nifkadata union between the energies of King Saul flowing through the Ze'er Anpin and then being transmitted in an intimacy to David. And this is the connection. You will be remembered because your seat will be vacant. Imachar Chodesh. With the concept, what does he say in the beginning? Tomorrow will be Chodesh. So here, listen to the idea over here. There's two points over here. Number one is Rosh Chodesh. But Rosh Chodesh is tomorrow. That means what's today? Today is Erev Rosh Chodesh, which means the day before Rosh Chodesh. Now we know in that Erev Rosh Chodesh, every day before the new moon is a day of deep introspection. It's supposed to be, for those people that are spiritually sensitive, every Erev Rosh Chodesh, they spend the day in doing tshuva. It's even called Yom Kippur Katan, a small Yom Kippur. And why is that? Because since Rosh Chodesh, the simple meaning is because every time, before you go to sleep at night, you should do teshuvah and cleanse yourself for what happened during the day. Before Shabbos, it says one should do a cleansing for what happened during the week. And before Rosh Chodesh, you should cleanse the mind because you always, take stock. Do an accounting. Someone who's taking life seriously knows that you need to constantly improve and do an evaluation, a self-inspection, a self-evaluation. That's the simple meaning. But in a much deeper meaning, what happens on Erev Rosh Chodesh? On Erev Rosh Chodesh, the day physically, what happens? The moon disappears completely from the sky. The moon is gone. What happens Rosh Chodesh the next day? There's a new moon. So what does that mean? We said earlier the moon is the Malchut, the feminine element. She's not always together with her husband, as we will learn later in the discourse. But on Rosh Chodesh, she's going to have an intimacy. That's the point, as we're seeking. V'nifkadata will be an intimacy. In order for her to receive a new light, she needs to empty out from everything she's had from before. Because a union with God, with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, means a transmission of something that is utterly beyond what you've ever known and ever experienced. Because if you know it already, then you don't need to receive that. You know it already; it's part of you. It means becoming enlightened with new insight or new light or new revelation or deeper depth or infinite energies that are utterly beyond. In order to receive that, you have to be an empty vessel. This idea is expressed even in our physical marriages, that a woman has a period of time when she's separated from her husband. But when she's going to have a return to him in the monthly cycle, which follows the moon, it's the same idea. The woman has to first go to the mikveh. And the mikveh is the idea of completely disintegrating. It's like her complete nullification. It's like the moon disappearing, because under the water you can't live. As the woman goes under the water, she loses her existence completely. She goes into nothingness. She comes out like a new person. And now, as a new person, she can receive this higher energy, this new light transmitted from her husband's soul spiritually into her, along with the physical intimacy, is a spiritual infusion into her soul. And that mirrors and reflects the spiritual dynamics in heaven of the Shekhinah, the same thing. On Erev Rosh Chodesh, the Shekhinah goes to the mikveh. What that means, disappears, completely nullifies herself. So there's no visibility of her. It's called bittul, complete nullification. But it's precisely that nullification that allows for the next day for her to be able to receive the union. Because she's no more limited, because when you become nothing, you go out of your limitations. It's like when you're coming to a new teacher, and the teacher is going to give you a whole brilliant new understanding which you've never ever heard. It was totally outside of your entire mindset. You can't come in with preconceived notions. You have to empty your head completely, be an empty space. And then you have no barriers, no boundaries. Then you can be open and receive new light. And that's the reason why every Erev Rosh Chodesh, it says we should also have a little Yom Kippur, a little tshuva. It's little compared to the main Yom Kippur, but it's the point of here is the same dynamic, because we're supposed to align ourselves with the spiritual dynamic. So as the Shekhinah goes into this tshuva state, nullification, self-annulment, we're supposed to annul ourselves also, do tshuva. The tshuva is not for bad things. The tshuva is for whatever we made of ourselves, for all of our mitzvot that we've done. We realize how poor and pathetic they were, how much deeper they could have been. It's a disintegration. We do tshuva for the knowledge that we know, because we realize that the knowledge that we have is so superficial and so shallow compared to what there is to know. We're dropping everything we have, so readying ourselves for something new. It's so terrible when people feel like, and it happens to all of us, we get to a certain point where we think we know everything already. And then we just, okay, what else? So the ability to be able to renew every time, like, I know nothing, and to do that monthly, it's like the complete emptiness and I don't know, maybe there's so much deeper than what I've ever thought. And open ourselves up to that wonder of what's beyond. So that's the Erev Rosh Chodesh. So the meaning of Machar Chodesh is, Erev Rosh Chodesh is the nullification of Malchut. Her absence, the moon disappearing, and then on Rosh Chodesh, she reappears and she receives the yichud. So now let's go to the story. It literally reflected the story of King David. What is Jonathan telling him? Tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh. So you, King David, you are the Shekhinah, you are the moon. Your seat is gonna be vacant, like the moon is vacant. You're not gonna be. That not being is gonna cause you to be remembered. What did we say? What does remembering over here mean? What word does it use? V'nifkadeto, there's gonna be a union. The union is gonna be what makes you ready for the union. You're not being there. And in this physical story was also that way. Why will King Saul think about it? He wouldn't be even the discussion if he would show up there. They wouldn't talk about him. He would just be like one of the guests. But because he's not here, where is he? So there's not being is going to provoke the question and bring the answer. Look at this. With tomorrow is Chodesh. Because on the day before Rosh Chodesh, the moon goes into hiding. So much so, a minute before the new moon is born, there's nothing left over. It's nothing. It's empty. Through this and through this happens afterwards will be Chodesh. The birth of the moon from the, which is Yichud Shimsha V'Sihara, which is the unity of the moon and the sun and the moon. The same is in Malchus. Shoyrish Alavana. He's showing you how it is in the moon, and then he's showing you how it is in the Sefirot above, in the divine attributes. Through this, that Malchut, the Shekhinah, goes into a nullification state. Shel David Malchus, that David is not here. Malchus, which represents the Shekhinah. That itself, al yedei zeh dafka v'nifkadeta. This is going to cause you to be remembered. Yichud Malchus imza. That Malchus is going to have that yichud v'nifkadeta, as we said earlier. V'nifkadeta doesn't only be remembered, but you will be in intimacy. By the way, this is the big secret of our times that we're living through right now. The vacancy of Malchus. The vacancy of Malchus. The seemingly concealment of the Rebbe at this time. Who would have thought it would be close to 30 years? But this is it. The rebirth of the Malchut comes after a concealment. A seat being vacant. An empty red chair. So what we're really going through the entire period of the last 30 years is an Erev Rosh Chodesh period for the rebirth of Malchus. And l'chora we can add the Zeshe b'Rosh Chodesh nasi yichud shimshe zasi hara Malchus. Now, see what the only problem over here is, for those who are a little very sensitive, is that, like, the union is not between Saul and David. Shaul is from Bina. So it's a little bit of a, if it would fit so beautifully like a glove, if Shaul would be Ze'er Ma'ampin, and David, you would say, V'nifkadeta, you're going to remember that Shaul will remember you. But since Shaul is Bina, the mother of the Ze'er Anpin, so what's she doing over here in the intimacy? Mom is supposed to go away during the intimacy. She shouldn't be there. Like, what's Bina doing here? It's her son got married, so to speak. The Ze'er Anpin got married. Mother, go home. He's not belonging there. It's like to bring the Bina in seems a little funny. That because who's the one who's remembering? Shaul. Shaul is personifying Bina, not Ze'er Anpin. So he explains, in order to make that peace. So till now he quoted from the Rebbe Marash, from his great-grandfather, from the fourth Chabad. This is the Rebbe's own addition, to smooth it out a little better. That's why he adds, if we can add. This that on Rosh Chodesh becomes the unity of Zah and Malchus, who? So he's going to add now another very interesting Kabbalistic idea. And that is, the nature of the divine emotions, are not to hang out with Malchut. In other words, this intimacy is not an easy intimacy. The Ze'er Anpin is not excited to be with Malchus. The reason for that is because he's mom's boy. He generally wants to cleave to his mother. It's like a kid who doesn't want to get out of the house. He wants to stay forever. He's living in his mom's house, and he's not ready to get married. He's not married to pick himself up and go find a wife. The Ze'er Anpin, why? Because the light, Bina, is very light and bright. And Malchus is very dim, is a very limited entity. He'd rather receive than transmit. He'd rather be a taker than a giver. So it says like this: in order to kick him out of the house, that he should get married, his mother buys him a special gift. So it says an interesting thing. There's a pasuk that says, Tse'ena or Re'ena, go out and see. B'melech Shlomo, in the King Shlomo. Ba'atara she'itra lo imai, the crown that his mother gave him b'yom chasanasai, on the day of his wedding. That tells you, it says in Kabbalah, that in order for Ze'er Anpin to have a marriage with Malchus, to have an intimacy with Malchus, Ze'er Anpin first receives an extra present, an extra crown. The Ze'er Anpin receives a crown from his mother. Who's the mother of Ze'er Anpin? Bina. Bina delivers a crown. A crown means a boost of transcendental energy. A very high gift, higher. In other words, just like Ze'er Anpin is going to give Malchus a high infusion that we said before, that Malchus needs to surrender herself completely to receive it. In the same way, Ze'er Anpin receives that enlightenment so that he will pass on to Malchus. So here we realize that for the intimacy, Bina has to be involved. Shol has to be involved. In other words, it's not like, okay, mother, she's not there. She's active in the marriage. She's active into facilitating it. She gives her son a crown, now go get married on the day of his wedding. That's the idea. Okay? It's drawn first into the moon. I'm sorry. It's drawn into the sun, which is the Ze'er Anpin, mipchinas le'elam in shimsha, from above the sun. What's above the sun? The sky above the sun, which represents Bina. Keser shalamayla mehishtalshalos. The male Sefirot, Chesed, Gevurah, Teferes, although they are divine, and although they are, in a sense, infinite, but they still have definition. And therefore, they're part of the evolution of the worlds. Chesed, like we said, God created the world in 6 days. Chesed, Gevurah, they're part of the system. Keter, light, crown, represents that which is utterly infinite and beyond the system. We say that the Ze'er Anpin receives a crown. What does that mean? Let's understand that. That means that Ze'er Anpin, which are the 6 emotions of God, are gifted with a puff of infinite light that usually it's not privy to. Usually it has a far more constricted energy flowing into these emotions. But when does he receive that gift? On the day of his wedding. If he wants to stay a bachelor, not getting it, will remain. It's only when he has to concentrate his light and give it to a much lower level. Shekhinah, Malchut is much less. It's really the source of creation on a much, much lower level. So he really doesn't want to go down to her. He feels like for him to explain to her something, it will take him forever. Like, what is she getting? She's so narrow in her mind. From the perspective of Ze'er Anpin, which is infinite, Malchut is considered already limited. He doesn't want to be with her. He doesn't want to transmit. But he gets a bonus. When he descends to her, he will be given a crown. He will be given a revelation of Keser. That's the meaning, Ba'atar. Now, and that Keser, although it's coming from Keser, it passes through Bina. That's the meaning. Ba'atara she'itra la'imoy. Really, it's not even light from Bina. It's light from above Bina. Again, the structure is like this. For those, I hope those that listening know a little Kabbalah, because the Maimer, by the way, all this Kabbalah is just in the first paragraph or two. Afterwards, it becomes very deep, but not such compact Kabbalah. Over here is where he lays out the entire, all the Kabbalistic ideas. So there's Keser, which is the infinite. Then there is Chachma Bina, which are the intellectual divine attributes. Then there are the 6 emotions. Then there are Malchus, and that operates from higher to lower. Malchus is the real source of creation, Shechina. She receives from her husband, from the emotions, transcendental emotions, the infinite emotions of God, which it receives a crown from Keser through Bina on the day of his wedding, which means when he is going to be intimate with his wife, with Malchus. And that is the reason why King Shaul HaMelech, is involved in this intimacy. Although it's not the intimacy between Saul and David, but it's through King Saul that this can flow, as he says. Like it says, in the crown that his mother gave him, on the day of his wedding. In order that there should be a unity between the Ze'er Anpin and Malchus. Yom Chasunasa, which is the day of the wedding, is through this that he receives first a crown, Keser. And how is this crown passed down to the Ze'er Anpin on the day of his wedding? Is through Bina. That's the meaning of the verse. The crown that he is crowned, Ima, his mother. With this, we'll understand even more of the connection. The Machar Chodesh, tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh. With the theme that you will be remembered because your seat will be vacant. Because what did we say earlier? Inyan Machar Chodesh. What's the idea of Machar Chodesh? Ma. Shal Yedei Helem v'Hester Alavana Shebe Erev Rosh Chodesh. Nasa b'Rosh Chodesh Ichot Shimshe v'Sihara. What's Machar Chodesh? Machar Chodesh is not just emphasizing. The Rebbe is saying something very deep over here. Machar Chodesh is not just emphasizing Chodesh. Chodesh is the union. Okay, what's Chodesh? A new moon. A new moon can only be because the moon and the sun had a union again. We're unified. That's how the moon receives a light. But the emphasis is not on Chodesh. The emphasis on the morrow will be Chodesh. Emphasizing the connection of Erev Rosh Chodesh to Rosh Chodesh. Why? As we said earlier, because Erev Rosh Chodesh, the day before Rosh Chodesh, is when the vacancy happens, the emptiness happens, which is what allows for the union to happen. Now, we explained earlier the reason why Malchus needs to disintegrate and completely vacate or completely lose herself completely, nullify herself. The reason why the woman needs to go to the mikveh, that idea. On the we explained it's or else she couldn't receive the abundant light that's bigger than her. So she has to kind of disintegrate from her limitations and boundaries and open herself up to a new chidush, to a new revelation. That's on one level, but there's a much deeper level why she needs to nullify. Because it's not only for her sake to receive, it's also for her husband's sake to be able to transmit. In other words, by her going to the mikveh, by her nullification, she's not only impacting herself to be a vessel for his light, she's also enabling him to be able to transmit to her. Why? Because what did we say earlier? In order for him, for the Ze'er Anpin to give light to Malchus, there needs to be a download from Keter. And here is the rule. Nothing can stimulate Keter. Keter is Ein Sof. You can't trigger Keser. There's only one thing that triggers Keser. Complete nullification. Bittul. When there is ayin, why? Because Keser is the ultimate reality. There's only God. So when something nullifies itself out of existence completely to non-beingness, that's what triggers and touches and pulls at Keser. Comes out that the Ze'er Anpin can't pull from Keser. Because the Ze'er Anpin doesn't have this bittul. Doesn't have this nullification. It's only her, only Malchus, which has that quality of becoming nothing. It's the humility of Malchus to disintegrate her completely. That's what evokes the Keter, which that Keter energy is then given to her husband, and then ultimately goes to her via the Bina to her husband, and then to Malchus. So the whole intimacy cannot happen without Machar Chodesh. Machar Chodesh means that we need to prepare for Chodesh. What's the preparation? The vacancy. So now we're learning something deeper. The Machar Chodesh is needed for the Pekida, for the unity, because you have to get from Keser. You have to get Shol involved. If you wouldn't have to get Shol involved, it would just be the sun and the moon. You wouldn't have to get what's beyond the sun involved. We need. Why do we need Bina? Because Bina is the pathway through where Keter light comes from. I'm not going to go into it right now. Why Keter goes through Bina, but that's the way it is. But in order to get to Bina, it's the bittul of Malchus. It's the Machar Chodesh that is necessary over here. Hu lefi shahabittul yichud shejad. Hu lefi shahabittul da halavana. Mashe misalem meso mistateres, this that the moon becomes nela and hides. Achalei nishabar filinekuda, until there is not even a nekuda left over. Magia lebchinas hakeser, that reaches and that touches keser. Shalamayla mishtashos, that sends a message. That awakens Keser. It touches, it affects Keser. Shememenu nimshach yadei bina, which from Keser through the bina comes hakoyach al yichud shimsha v'sihara, the power, the ability for this unity of the sun and the moon. And so too is the idea of an ifkadata. So this is the same idea of an ifkadata ki yipaket mishavech. Sha'al yedei sheyipaket. Again, we're saying, why do we, see, it's emphasized in the story. The vacancy itself, if no one would be absent, this whole story would not have happened. Shaul wouldn't be talking. The whole event is triggered by what? By someone not showing up. So that is on the spiritual dimension, means who is being triggered over here? Bina. Really, it's not Bina, it's Keser that's being triggered. Why is Keser being triggered? Because someone is not here. No one can trigger Keser by being. You can only trigger Keser by being absent. And the only one who can be absent is David. No one else can be absent. Really absent is only David. He has the ability of total bittul. Comes from Shevet Yehuda. David says about himself, "Nafshi ka'afar lakol tiyah." I'm sorry. It says he refers to himself as total nothingness. Through this, that the seat of David is going to be vacant. Malchus al yedei even if kadeta the David aydei Shaul. Through this will be the remembrance of David through Shaul. Hamshachas habina. Bina will be drawn down together with the lights of Keser. Shaul merachayve sanar. That's Shaul. Shaul is the vayedei, and through that hamshachas hakeser, we're drawing the crown. Batara sheitru layimai. That's the mother's crown that's given to the Ze'er Anpin to have a yichud with Malchus. Number one, we all get to see that there's more to a story than just reading Samuel 2. Samuel 1, when you read a story. First of all, you realize that we don't even begin to understand anything when we learn Torah. Right? You see from here, suddenly you got a whole story over here that's going on in the deepest divine attributes as they are unifying, and these are like the hidden, the cosmic energies as they are being transmitted from one to the other. The whole system is being, the whole existence is being generated from this story. We think it's just a story between an event that happened that was written in the newspapers the next day, in the political analysis. We're talking about, like, oh, someone said there was a blow up in the palace yesterday. Imagine the newspapers the next day. There are sources that are telling us that there was a blow up in the palace, that there was that Jonathan and his father had a moment. That's reported. That was the story down here. But this is all since the Torah is telling it to us, it's telling us a much deeper story. Now, by the way, we haven't even begun the discourse. We haven't even started. This is just the little, this is just when you open up a package from IKEA, if you buy a furniture, and you take out, these are the screws, these are the pegs. Here's we're laying out the parts now over here. What we're going to be working with, okay? But tzarich love, and we need to understand. Okay, so this is the basis of the Rebbe Marash's discourse. Now the Rebbe is going to come and he's going to ask a whole bunch of questions, and based with these questions, he's going to really open us up to the real meaning behind the story. Like, what does this really mean? And apply it to ourselves. It's not going to be just the Kabbalah of the heavens. It's going to be the story of ourselves. We're going to see ourselves in all of this, and our lives in all of this. Tzarich love, we need to understand. The nifkadeta lashon zikaron, the word v'nifkadeta, which means remembered. It also has another meaning, as we discussed earlier. It also means intimacy. Remembered and intimacy. But remembered and intimacy fit very nicely with each other. Because remembered means one person is thinking of someone else. And an intimacy is obviously the two of them are deeply interlocked with each other. So that's okay. The problem is that the same word, although it's not, what does it say? V'nifkadeta ki yipaked moshavech. Because your seat will be vacant. So, remembrance and intimacy and vacancy are total opposite. Vacancy means an emptiness, an absence is kind of, you're forgotten, you're absent, you're forgotten, you're not there. And remembrance means you are present. And being absent is definitely the opposite of being so close that there's an intimacy. The two opposites. So the question is, what's the question? How can it be? How can it be that through an absence should bring the remembrance, or should bring the intimacy? when one thing causes something else, the cause and the thing that it's causing have a relationship. And here we have two things where one thing brings the other, where the cause and the effect seem to be completely opposites from each other. But we find it, now we could say, well, they find that that's the nature. I always give the example of children sometimes in school. Sometimes certain kids go under the radar. The teacher never asks of them. They're quiet in class. And the teachers sometimes, because they get, it's not always the teacher's fault. I mean, a really good teacher doesn't let that happen. But sometimes a teacher who gets like very engaged by certain students that are very, very interactive and very involved, they completely consume the mind and the attention of the teacher, that a lot of kids fall through the cracks. So sometimes there are kids that feel that they're completely irrelevant in the classroom, sadly. But you know when they're noticed? When they don't come to school, and then the teacher gets upset why they weren't there. It's like or they came 10 minutes late. So sometimes kids, I'm sure, on purpose comes late because at least the teacher makes notice. Where were you? What's going on? Why you're late? You have a note. At least I exist. I exist that you're yelling at me why I'm late, why I wasn't here. So we see that we also find that absence causes the heart to go fond, which means that the desire of closeness comes because of the distance. So in that sense, we can argue that that's what it means. Because he's going to be vacant, that's why he's going to be remembered. It doesn't seem to be so problematic. But yet the Rebbe is asking the question. He's saying, after everything is said and done, I guess it's physically that way. I mean, it's part of nature that way, that because you're absent, you're remembered. That the absence itself, like the story, again, you see the whole scheme of the story was, you're not going to show up, and that's why you're going to be spoken of. That's the theme of the story. But it seems like, from the world of logic, that doesn't make any sense. It makes sense that if you're present, you're going to be remembered, because you're going to be noticed. If you're not there, you'll be forgotten. That makes sense. Now, I know that there is some nature to the opposite, that when you're absent, you're remembered, like I just explained in various things. But that itself seems to be abnormal. And it could be the only reason there is such a nature in the world is because there is such a nature in the godly. And that itself, he's asking, what's the reason for the nature in the godly? That the absence causes the closeness, the intimacy. It would be something like this. I'm going to make a example of this. There is a job opening. 10 people apply for an interview. 9 of them show up, submit their applications, and show up for the interview. One of them that had an appointment at 3:15 p.m. didn't show up. And for 15 minutes, and for half an hour during the appointment, from this fellow that didn't show up, the interviewer, the manager, the boss, or whatever it is has a empty space. There's no one to interview. And yet all 9 do not land the job, and Dafka, the one who didn't show up for the interview, that's the one who gets the job. And I'm not saying because, let's say, they qualify more. If they qualified more because they presented that on their application, then they were present. I'm saying, does it make any sense that the one who was absent, the absent applicant, the absent one from the interview if those who show up, one of them will get the job, but it would make sense the one that was the most engaging, the one that was the most most present, if you might say, to be selected, not the one who's not. That's kind of the question over here. The eich is, since they're opposites, the eich efshesha they yipoked, that through the absent, even if kadata, that will cause the remembrance. Now, the Rebbe says, wait, we just gave an explanation. Remember we said that in order for this union to happen, we need to draw from the very, very high infinite light. And the infinite is not impressed with anything. The only thing that touches it, for whatever reason, is nothingness. So, and nothingness means absence. In other words, you can never, ever, ever do a performance that will cause the Ein Sof to go, wow. The Ein Sof is not impressed with anybody or anything. So anything you do, anything you are, anything you make yourself to be is not impressive. The only thing that does allow that light to be touched, if you might say, is to be not. Like we discussed earlier. So now it makes sense. Since in order to have a union, you have to get to that spiritual, here with this intimacy, you have to get to that infinite light. And the infinite light is only impressed, so to speak, by bittul, by nullification, by being not. So maybe that could be the answer. So the Rebbe is trying to answer his own question. Maybe, as we said, we gave an explanation. Because Malchut, because of the bittul of Malchus, because Machar Chodesh, because tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh. We said before, Erev Rosh Chodesh is a time of nullification. It's a time of disintegration. It's a time when a person feels, as we spoke in our own lives, we can realize that that everything we've achieved and everything we've done is worth nothing, and we become like a seed that disintegrates completely, and that stirs, and that itself draws the new potential, the new infinite light. Well, that's a good explanation. If the place from where we're drawing from would be a relatively higher than us, then we can engage with it through advancing ourselves to a higher, to be closer to it. But if the place from where we need to receive from, our target, is a place that's utterly infinite, and therefore no matter how beautiful you become and how much you make of yourself, you're not going anywhere. You're not getting any closer or any more relevant to this infinite light, then it's a waste of time. So if you cannot climb up to it, maybe you can climb down to it. How do you climb down to it? There's one thing that amuses the Ein Sof. Is when something turns to nothing. Because its perspective is that everything is nothing. Because in front of it, everything is nothing. But it knows that we see ourselves as something. So when we kind of see eye to eye with it and we agree with it, that we are really nothing, then it says, okay, so you agree with me. Okay, now I notice you. That's kind of the idea. So the Av, and that would be the explanation, but the Rebbe is not going to, he's not going to accept this. You'll hear how beautiful it is, how deep it is. The Av sheyapoket moshavecha zeh shenechzer makom mishaveh. This, that the seed is vacant. Kosher minyan habittel is related to nullification. V'habittel magia bekeser, And the rule is always that the bittul nullification touches the keter, touches the infinite light canal. Which that gives the power for the unity. That's not the union, but that gives the power for the union. Remember we spoke about that? But the Rebbe says, no, this won't. And maybe that would be the connection between the vacancy and the remembrance. Following? That the vacancy is what stimulates the place from where the power comes for the union to happen. Nevertheless, from this, that Rashi explains that what does it mean your seat will be vacant? Not that it doesn't say. He doesn't say to David, because you won't be there. That's not what he says. He says you will be remembered. Doesn't say you will be remembered because you won't be there or because you won't come. Doesn't say that. He says you will be remembered because your seat will be vacant. Meaning it's irrelevant. You're not relevant over here. What's relevant is that there's a vacancy. There's just nothing. Oh, that means that the trigger over here is not something becoming nothing, but it's the nothingness itself. You see, it's amusing when something becomes nothing. And we can say that to God, there's nothing in the world that is interesting. In Hasidus, let me give you something. In Hasidus, they give an example to this idea, and from this we'll understand it really well. And we learned this many times in discourses, that a king who's very, very great, and people come to the king all the time, and the king is on his phone looking at his emails, and meanwhile he's at an audience. People are coming. He's busy. His mind a lot. You can be waiting for years to get an appointment to see the king. You come to the king, and the king happens to be, suddenly looking for his cat. And he lets you talk, and he's not there. So one of the things you knew that when you finally landed your audience with the king, you needed to make sure the king will give you the full attention. As a result of that, you wanted to always amuse the king. You wanted to catch him. You knew you have a chance. It's like hit or miss. It's like the king will grant you what you want. It's everything. You miss nothing. It's like the biggest shame. Right? We all know we have points just like that. We have situations like that. So people would bring gifts, and the gift. But what are you going to bring a king? You get him another beautiful gold Rolex. He has a whole library of 250 Rolexes. It doesn't need your Rolex. It's not. You're going to give him a gold whatever garnished. What are we going to do? So it says that to catch the mind of the king, you have to bring him something that is amusing, something unusual. So a person would come in with a parrot, and he would have the parrot say something really, and the king would catch the attention because the parrot said, Your Majesty, the king, you're the greatest, whatever. And suddenly the king. Now, when the parrot said it, he said it very, very poor articulation, but he still said it. Well, why not come in and say the most beautiful poetic words? Because the king is not impressed with a human being able to talk. But when a bird speaks, it catches it, and then the king is listening to you already. You've engaged. You've engaged the king. So it says that's the example that the God, you can't impress him with nice things. Angels can do all the nice prayers and all the nice things that you will do. God has servants and beings up there, celestial beings that can do it much nicer than you. Nothing impressive. What does excite God? The Ein Sof. That's what it says. What excites it? When something that is unusual. What's unusual? We mentioned earlier. God knows that we can't get out of our self-importance because it's intrinsic to us that we feel we exist. He knows how ridiculous and insane that is because he knows he's existence and everything else is not. But he knows what kind of game he played with us, that he completely messed with our brains to the point that we are stuck in the prison of feeling ourselves as very real. When one of us, or when a being does the most amazing trick and frees itself from its own self and appreciates how it's utterly nothing, that's an acrobatic stunt that reaches the Ein Sof. That's the idea. That's what we learned in Chassidus. So we're learning that earlier. And that's the reason why, Ki Yipaked, when David, the Malchut, which is the source of creation, the source of beingness, the source of the world, the source of time and space, nullifies itself. Oh, that reaches Keter. That reaches the Ein Sof. Then it should say the fact that David, you will not come. You will. It's not what it says. It says seat will be vacant. So let me ask you, is the king amused? Is the Ein Sof rather amused just by nothingness? Nothing. Nothingness is not interesting. What's interesting is that something becomes nothing. That's an acrobatic stunt. But nothing? Something that, just nothingness? What's nothingness? Nothingness. Since in the verse, the Rebbe learns every element of it so deeply. He says, since there is no, over here the emphasis is not that David will make himself nothing. You will blow up yourself. You will not be. The emphasis is, v'nifkadeta, you'll be remembered, ki yipaked, because of the vacancy. It seems to imply that it's the absence itself, not the fact that you're absent, that there is but rather just non-being itself, the nothingness, that's what is related to remembrance. So that needs understanding. Because how does not bring yet? How does non-being land you the job with the Ein Sof? Land you the God's attack? How does nothingness, it's not you becoming, not the quality of bittul, of becoming nothing. Not the something being nullified. Let's imagine if today's days you can cut a movie. Okay, we can cut all, photo, you can Photoshop. So imagine you have this being who's something and turns himself into nothing. So you have the screen, he shows you the something, the somebody, the person, and they say, watch this amazing stunt. The person is literally going to disappear. Everybody's watching. And there's that second he's saying, whatever they're doing, the abracadabra type of thing, and spinning and turning, and suddenly, boom, they vanish. And the cameras are filming, so the moment the yeah becomes no, the vanishing happens, it's like, wow. But then the camera still is taking film of what? Of the empty space. So if you're showing this film to someone, and you say, you got to watch this, and you show them the person sitting there, and suddenly he's gone. That's wow. But what happens if you Photoshop the film, and you cut out the vanishing, and you just come to the part where there's nothing there? So what are you showing? Where there's nothing. But we're supposed to be impressed with nothing. That's the point that the Rebbe is making over here. It seems like in the verse that the connection to the remembrance is not the vanishing, but the nothingness itself that happens after the vanished. What's that? How does that lead to the remembrance? What is that? But we're still going to see the deep secret of that. Just wait. Just wait that when we find out that the ultimate vanishment, the ultimate nothingness is actually our material physical bodies. That's the nothingness. Remember, I'm connecting it to them. I'm trying to keep you engaged with the final idea. Remember we spoke about how the physical body is the ultimate? The physical body is the ultimate nothingness in the ultimate sense of the word. Because physicality is the ultimate nothing of nothing. But it holds the key to the ultimate truth. It's really cool. It's so cool, this. You have no idea. Not the work of becoming nothing, but the nothingness itself. Ugh, it's really wild. But let's wait till we get there. The depth of what the Rebbe pumps out of here is stunning. Yeah. Mashman implies that the place will be vacant. Mashman, that implies the zesha yipakid mashavecha, this that your seat will be vacant. Hutam al v'nifkadata. It's a reason for the v'nifkadata. V'nifkadata, you'll be remembered. Ki yipakid mashavecha, cause you will be vacant. Who? Loirak, not only lefisha yipakid mashavecha kashurim inyan abitul. Not only because your pocket mashavecha is connected to the bittul, elegam also she your pocket mashavecha, your seat being vacant, atzmai she mashavecha chaser, that your seat is empty, hutam al v'nifkadata. The emptiness itself is the reason for the v'nifkadata, that you will be remembered. We need to understand. Eich shayach she your pocket lashon chisarin. How can the just emptiness itself, non-beingness, bring to you should be remembered? Now he asks another question. Why does he use the term? V'nifkadat, you'll be remembered. Ki yipaket. He could have used a better word. Ki yechsar moshavecha. Yechsar means lacking. Chaser, lacking. Instead, it uses the word yipaket. Now hold it. The word yipaket, we said earlier, also means remembered, and also means unity. But over here, the same word yipaket means empty. It seems to imply that not only does the emptiness lead to the remembrance or lead to the unity, but they're both the same. The yeah and the no are actually the same because they use the same word. In other words, if it would say just v'nifkadata ki yechsar moshavecha, you will be remembered, or you'll be in an intimacy. Because you will be forgotten. I'm sorry, because you will be lacking or vacant or absent rather. Or because you will be missing. Yechsar means missing. Then we would say that for whatever reason, we don't understand how, but the absence and the missing in action, that vacancy, that emptiness leads to something later. The fact that it chooses to use the word for vacancy, which is actually the same word as union, seems to imply that in the vacancy and emptiness and the missingness itself, in there itself is already there the remembrance and the unity. Now it will lead to it, which is adding even more depth there. And this makes it even more confusing. This is totally a contradiction. A contradiction of yeah and no at the same time. Shashayich is the yipaked l'nefkadata, the connection of yipaked l'nefkadata. Zaloisha yipaked mevi l'nefkadata. Not that yipaked leads to the nefkadata. Elisha be yipaked atzmai. But that in the yipaked itself, yash behelim inyan v'nefkadata. It itself has already the v'nefkadata, the remembrance. So we need to understand, how does that work? Okay. This is chapter 1 in the discourse. How many chapters do we have? We'll take a look in a minute. As I said earlier, this is basically laying out the 12 chapters. We're 12th through. Let's try to do chapter 2 today. Now he continues in the discourse. Now, who initiated this whole thing? What does the verse begin with? Vayomer Lo Yonason. That Yonason said to who? Vayomer Lo. Jonathan, Yonatan speaks to David. So now he's going to reveal the deep secret of Yonatan speaking. Till now we have the Yonason is the one who's talking, but he's not part of the story here. It's really David and King Saul, right? Shaul HaMelech and David HaMelech. It's between the father-in-law and son-in-law. And this union that's taking place between them, but who's the one talking? It's Yonason. So this says also every word of Torah has a mystical meaning. So basically now, right, by the way, in chapter 2, we're not yet beginning to build. We're opening up another bag that comes in the box with a whole bunch of different pieces. Okay, we're going to throw it all into the mix. I'm just telling you that there's a lot we're going to be working with here. So let's see. He continues in the discourse. Now he's going back to the discourse of his predecessor, of the Rebbe Marash. And he's going to continue working with the teachings that he taught then. He says the Yonason if you take a look at the name Jonathan, Yonason in Hebrew, you get a very deep secret. That Yonason starts with 3 letters of God's name. Yud, K, Yud, He, Vav. And then it has the word Nasan. Nun, Taf, Nun. So we can divide it into Yud, He, Vav, which are the first 3 letters of God's name, because God's name is Yud, He, Vav, and then another He. In the word Yonason, you don't have the letter He. You have Yud, K, Vav, and then you have the word Nasan. So what does that mean? It says in a Kabbalistic work called Ma'orei Or, which is a encyclopedia on Kabbalistic terms, written by one of the great students of the Ari. I have the book over here, Ma'orei Or. Shenasan, that the word Nasan, bigamatria tafkuf. The word Nasan is the same word as Nathan. Nasan. Nasan is the numeric value Taf Nun Nun. So what is Taf Nun Nun? Taf is 400. Nun and Nun is another 100. Together it's 500. So that is hinting to the final Hey of Hashem's name. The final name of Hashem's name, the final letter of God's name. Final letter is Hey. Hey is 5. But 5 is 5, not 500. So he's going to connect the two. Tav Kuf Hu Hey Achroina D'Shem Avaya. Nasan is Gematria Tav Kuf, is Gematria Tav Kuf, which is 500. And which Hu Hey Achroina D'Shem Avaya. It's the latter Hey of the Shem Avaya. Ki Hey Bahaka Begematria Tav Kuf. Because Hey with the method of gematria called Haka is gematria 500. Now, what's the method of Haka? So I was racking my brain today to remember how this works. How you do the gematria of Haka. I thought it means you times, first I thought it's you times 5 times, you times the letter. So first I thought it meant 5 times 5, which is 25. Then I thought, so maybe it means 5 times 25, and then one more time, meaning, and then times 25. But 25 times 25 is more than 500, so it doesn't work. Then I thought it meant, so I remember, and I remember every time I learned this mimer, I'm always stuck on this. Then I realized I'm wasting so much time trying to figure this out. I wasn't going to learn the rest of the discourse, so I stopped. I don't remember how Hakol works, but there's a way. And then I'm thinking, like, maybe it's the hidden letter inside the Hey, which is, let's say it's Hey Yud. So it's Hey Yud. I thought maybe it's 5 times 5, which is 25. And then 10 times 10, which is 100. But then 25 is 125. You plus it. Or maybe 5 times 10 and then 10 times 5. They would just be 100 and 100. It'd be 200. Cannot for the life of me remember how Hakol works. Maybe 5. Someone told me, I think 5 to the power of 5. How does that work? Does anybody know math? I don't know any math. I'm totally ignorant in these. What does 5 to the power of 5 mean? I don't know why that's sitting in my head. Better go back to school one day and learn all these basic stuff. No? New Year's resolution. I'm going to go back to high school. All the stuff I missed in high school. Okay, I don't remember. Somehow, Hey Bahaka, you get from the letter Hey, somehow there is a method where it turns into 500. And I don't remember how. Anyways, Umadayik Ba'amaimer. And he explains in the discourse. Oh, so what do we have? What do we have based on this? That Yonatan is the full 4 letters of God's name. Yud Kei Vav, and then Nasan is symbolizing the letter Hey. So it's Yud Kei Vav Kei. But the Rebbe Marash asks a question in the discourse. In most places, not in this Kabbalistic book that we just said, it gives another interpretation of what the dynamics of Yonason is. In other places, it says that Yonason represents the Yud, the Hey, and the Vav of God's name. And the Nasan means that the Yud Kei Vav Nasan, the Yud Kei Vav is giving. Who is the Yud Kei Vav giving to? So we know that all the energies of Atzilut, all the Sefirot, Yud is Chachma, Hey is Bina, Vav is the 6 emotions. Nasan is being given to Malchus. I'm waiting for my students to finish writing. So, according to that, Yud Kei Vav, according to that, it would make sense of here. Vayoma Lo Yonason, Yonason says to David means that the Yud Kei Vav, Nasan, is being given to who? To David. Who's David? David is Malchut. So Yonason giving to David is actually already part of this union. Remember, we're talking over here a dynamic of the highest Sefirot flowing to Malchus. Well, Vayomer Lo Yonason, Yonason says to David. So Yonason is Yud Kei Vav, which are the highest Sefirot, transcendental male Sefirot, and he's the son of Shaul, right? And he's giving Vayomer Lo and Nasan, and in the word Nasan means he's transmitting, and that's part of what Vayomer Lo means. He says to David. So then it would make sense. But if we say that Nasan itself is not a verb, but Nasan itself is, which means to give, but rather Nasan is a noun. It's part of the name. It's part of the Yud Kei Vav. And what's the Nasan? Nasan is the Hey, because it's 500, which is the Hey of God's name. So Malchut is already in the Yonasan. Comes out Yonason includes Malchut already. So then if Malchus is there already, what does it mean Yonason is giving to David? David is Malchus. It's already in Malchut. In Yonatan, it's already in Malchut. You have already the dynamic of Yud Kei Vav Hey, which is flowing into Malchus in the word Yonasan. So what's being given to Malchut? What is being given to David from Yonasan if Yonasan includes Malchut already? That's the question he asks in the discourse. Again, he brings two interpretations of what the word Yonatan means, Kabbalistically. One interpretation is Yud Kei Vav, the higher Sefirot, Nasan are flowing. Nasan means they're being given, they're flowing. Another interpretation is Yud Kei Vav, and then Nasan is somehow the numeric value of the latter Hey. So Yonasan itself is the entire configuration of Atzilut, all the 10 Sefirot. But if so, what does it mean that he gives to Malchus if it's already in Malchut in Yonasan? So here we're going to get to the same pirush we learned in the earlier Maimer, Esther and Hadassah. Then we learned that Malchut exists first in Atzilus, and then she's called Hadassah. She receives from the Hadas. And we were learning in the earlier discourse how the three branches on the Hadassim, Hadas represent Chesed, Gevurah, Teferes, the husband, and Hadassah is because she's receiving from her husband. So Yonasan is the Hey. Yonatan represents the Hey of God, the Malchut, as it is still still connected to the Yud Kei Vav. It's still in Atzilus. David represents the Malchut that goes down already into the lower world to create. Because we know that there are two levels in Malchut. There's one level of Malchut where Malchut is the end of the higher Sefirot of Atzilut, of the divine. Another level of Malchus where Malchus becomes the mother of all the world. She descends lower. So that's going to be the answer. According to the interpretation that Yonasan includes Malchus, Vayoma Lo Yonasan means that the 10 Sefirot, the 9 Sefirot that all flow into Malchus, the Yud, the Hey, the Vav, all flow into Nasan, into Malchus, is now giving to David, empowering the Malchus that's descending and going down into the world. That's where he's going to get to. Okay? Let's read inside. And he asks in the Maimer like this. According to the explanation in most places, that Yonasan is only the first 3 letters of God's name. The Nasan shebe Yonasan, and the Nasan of the word Yonasan, that the Yud Kei Vav are in a state of being given. Moving Mashakasav, it's understood what it says. Vayomer loy Yonasan. The emphasis is on the word lo. That Yonasan is Hamshacha mi Yonasan le David. That Yonasan is giving over to David. Shayud Kei Vav de Yonasan nimshachu le Malchus are being drawn to Malchut, which is David. Aval pirish ha'ma'oire oir. But according to the pirish of the Ma'oire oir, the Nasan shebi Yonasan hu heyachreina, that the Nasan of the word Yonasan is heyachreina, is the latter hey, he ha-malchus, that is Malchus itself. Ma'hu inyan vayoma lo Yonasan. So what does it mean, vayoma lo Yonasan, that Yonasan gives to David? Hamshachas Yonasan le David. Harei Nasan de Yonasan v'David em l'chayra ha'nahach. Nathan and David are the same entity, spiritually. The Nathan of the word of Jonathan, of the Nasan, the Nasan of is already Malchus. David is also Malchus. So what does it mean? Vayomer lo Yonasan, that Yonasan is transmitting something, is communicating to David. Again, this question is not in the physical world. This question is in the spiritual dynamics of what this represents, these names, this communication. What does this mean? Umevar. And therefore he explains. The b'malchus shtei madregos. And in Malchus, there's 2 levels. Kamoishi hi soif Atzilus. As the Malchus is the end of the world of Atzilus, which is, remember we said that there's a Mishnah that says, is it a Mishnah? Yeah, it's a Mishnah Masechtas Avos, which we're starting this Shabbos ethics of the fathers. So the Mishnah says in Masechtas Avos that you should always try to be a tail to a lion and don't be a head of a fox. rather be the end of a higher group than be the leader of a lower group. So it's referring to the Shekhinah. It says that she's the end of Atzilut, and then she's called the tail of the lion. When she becomes the mother of the finite world, she's called the head of the fox. Because the fox is a far more inferior animal to a lion. It's an inferior beast. So again, Malchus is two levels. That's when she's a tail to the lion. And as she becomes the source to the three lower worlds, Bria, Yetzir, and Asiya, the three lower worlds, Rosh L'Shu'olim, she becomes the head of the fox. And that's the difference between the Nosan of the word Yonatan. That means according to that Yonatan, he's completely living in the world of Atzilut. Every single part of his name is in the world of Atzilut, which is utterly divine. The Nosan, Nosan, which is the latter hey of the name Havaya, of the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei, the tetragrammatic it is Kliel, Hu HaMalchus, that's referring to the Malchus, Kamoshi Hu Seif Atzilus, as it is the latter stage of the world of Atzilus. The David, Hu HaMalchus, is the Malchus, Kamoshi Makar Lebiyah, as it becomes a source for the three lower worlds. What does it mean, Vayayim Lo Yonason? Is a special empowerment that Malchut of Atzilut transmits to the Malchut that's going down. It would be something like this. In our own souls, we know that not our entire soul goes into a body. Only the tail end of our soul vests itself in our human consciousness. A great part of our soul remains in the highest spheres above. And it would mean that the transcendental soul is infusing the immanent soul, the vested soul, with certain power from above, because the soul that is vested in the body needs an extra boost and is feeling stifled without this higher illumination. That's the idea. The Malchut above is empowering Malchut below. Drawing down the Malchus, as she is in Atzilus, Nosan, Heyachroina, the level of Nosan, of the Yonatan, the Nosan of the Yonason, which is the Heyachrona, the latter Hey of God's name, and along with the Malchut, once Malchut of Atzilus comes down, once the Malchut of Atzilus is giving to the Malchut, that's the mother of the creation, in infusion, it's not just she's giving Malchut, she's giving whatever is planted in her from higher as well, because she's like a bowl. She's like an empty bowl. She receives, Malchus is like this big bowl that's receiving all the lights of Atzilut. So, but that's the Malchus in Atzilus. And when she gives down lower, she's giving of herself together with whatever was implanted to her from her husband into the Malchut that goes down, right? Because it's Vayom, that's why it says Vayoma, it doesn't just say Vayoma loy Nosan, you see? It doesn't say Nosan, Nathan said to David. It says Yonason said to David. That means that the Yud Kei Vav are also part of the download. Vayomer lo is a download. He's saying to him means he's downloading, he's transmitting. It's not just the Nosan is transmitting, that's the Malchut, but also the Yud Kei Vav, the entire lights of Atzilus are being imbued into the Malchus that goes down. Baha Malchus shehu mekar lebiyah, into the Malchus that's the source of the three lower worlds. David, which is David. Okay, who would have thought that all of this is in the pasuk? Ma'asev Baha Maimer, and he adds in the discourse. The shtei hapchinois shebe Malchus, these two levels of Malchus. The Malchus as it is the end of the world of Atzilut, and the Malchus as it becomes a source of the three lower worlds of creation. is also referred to in many places as sea and dry land. We learned about it by Shvishal Pesach at night. The hidden world and the revealed world, the two parts of the Malchut. That Malchus is sometimes called Yam and sometimes called Eretz. We learned it. We learned something beautiful Rosh Hashanah by night, not Rosh Hashanah by night. We learned it just Shvishal Pesach. That's not on YouTube because I don't record on Yom Tif, right? But on Shvishal Pesach by night, we learn a discourse. And over there he says that in Rosh Hashanah, he says something so beautiful. On Rosh Hashanah is the time of Binyan HaMalchut. We construct the kingship of God. And we say, therefore, chapter of Psalm 24, LeDavid Mizmor, and we emphasize, or we speak both about the ocean and about dry land. Lashem ha'oretz u'maloyoi tevel v'yoshveva ki hu al yamim yesada. We speak about sea and dry land because Malchut has two parts to it. The Malchut, as it is, the end of Atzilus is called the ocean. And the Malchut, as she comes down to become the mother of the creation, is called dry land. Why? In ocean is a hidden place. And in the ocean, everything is covered up. The ocean is like this massive concealment on what's inside of it. So the function, let's think about it. I mean, there's so much deep ideas that we haven't even begun to explain. We're just talking like various different Sefirot, but what really they mean, we haven't spoken about tonight because, like as I said, this class would never end. But just bekitzer, just in short, we've started, and I'm relying on the fact that we discussed these ideas many times, so therefore, this is an advanced share for those who might have not noticed it yet, that this is an advanced class. So, the function of the Malchut in Atzilus, the higher Malchus, is that Malchus serves as a transition from the divine to the creation. And Malchus is primarily, its function is to serve as an incredible filter and screen, to hold back, to stop the revelation of God. Because above Malchus, nothing can exist, only God. Malchus receives all the godly input, all the divine energies flowing into her, but she conceals them all inside of her and doesn't allow it to pass, thereby creating this barrier for a space to be able to happen where actual creations can come into existence. She's in a sense similar to the Tzimtzum Harishon, to the first Tzimtzum that we spoke about last night, that conceals the infinity of God. So Malchus is she's a derivative of that Tzimtzum, of that contraction. She closes off. And that's why she's compared to an ocean. Just like there's an abundant rich world in the ocean, but the ocean hides it all. Closes it. I'm sorry, you can't see what's inside of me. So Malchus of Atzilus receives all the lights from above and hides it. But just by hiding, worlds are not created. Just from concealment is, as we said earlier, concealment is just no, it's not yet. To create, you need to have energy. You need to have... So after Malchus conceals all the infinite lights, the lower part of Malchut, a filtered, limited, what we might say, a watered down version of divinity, enormously watered down version of divinity, opens up and transmits energy lower. And that becomes, and that's the revelation of Malchus, not the concealment. And that's why it's like dry land. Dry land is revealed, open. And what happens on dry land? Everything can grow. There's trees and vegetations and animals and everything. The dry land sustains life. but nothing like the life in the ocean. In the ocean, everything is swallowed by the water. Everything is swallowed in this. So the ocean represents, the sea represents the world of Atzilus, and the Malchut, which is concealing on all that infinity. And that's the higher part of Malchus, the concealment. What she lets out to create, the limited energy that she emits, that descends, that we said earlier, that descends down to create the world, is compared to the land, which supports life in a revealed way, because it's that God gives life to creations and allows these creations to exist with a certain autonomousness, with a certain independence, with a certain separateness. It's like the sea, the dry land. Usually, and this is the system. The tail of the lion is the sea. The head of the fox is the earth. You say Mother Earth. Mother Earth is the Shekhinah, is the Malchut. Mother Earth. She's mothering all of creation. She's sustaining all creation. But that's much lower than the ocean and the sea. That's the system, the way the system usually is. Sea and dry land. But then there are certain occasions where the Shekhinah, that's the source of dry land, needs some assistance. It needs some refurbishing, needs a rejuvenation. So you know what happens? The sea splits. What happened during the splitting of the sea? The ocean opens up and becomes dry land. What does that mean? It really means that the lights that were till now hidden in Atzilut, the hidden lights that were in Atzilus, are allowed to come down into the dry land. If you would try to really understand that example, it would be similar to the idea. You would understand it better if I would say that from time to time the ocean floods the earth. That even the dry land gets the waters of the ocean, covers all the way over, and then the dry land is now suddenly watered with all these incredible lights that were once hidden and stayed in the sea. Now it comes out and covers the earth. That's when it would be clearer, the idea that he's trying to convey. That usually there's a barrier that allows. In other words, on most cases, everything remains in Atzilut. The head of the fox and the tail of the lion do not really converge. The tail of the lion remains above and the head of the fox remains separated. There are times when the lion extends its tail into the head of the fox. That's the concept of Hafach Yam Layabasha. Hashem converts the sea into dry land, which means he brings, doesn't only mean that the sea becomes dry. It means he brings the sea consciousness, the sea lights, the lights that are infinite and boundless, that are shining only in the sea. He brings it on to the dry land. And that's the concept of Vayoma Lo Yonason. That's the concept that Yonatan gives to David. David is the Malchut as its sea, as its dry land. Yonatan is the Malchut as it's the ocean. And that the ocean is now opening up to the dry land, that's the idea of Yonatan the dove. That's what the Rebbe Marash says. It's all these dynamics coming together. Now, by the way, I'm just telling you that right now it sounds like a whole lot of cool Kabbalistic ideas. But as we're going to learn, we're going to see that this is literally like the deepest story of not just mystical ideas up there, but literally of our lives, of our interaction of our soul and our body, and what it takes to get a soul to come down in a body. And like it's a cosmic story, but it's also a personal story. This is all going to develop. But this is Hasidus Chabad. It's not Torah in a nutshell. It's a lengthy, complex study. especially the Rebbe's discourses. That's what makes the Rebbe very different than all his predecessors. Their style is so different. The Rebbe is the one that weaves together a million things. He weaves, and builds, and builds, and builds, and builds. It's like this entire, he's the ocean, he's the Malchut. Takes everything inside and turns it, and by the time it comes out on the other side, it's a whole new, it's a brilliant mosaic of ideas with a depth that we haven't seen before. Follow along. Moise Maimer explains in the discourse, the two levels of Malchus, Nikra b'Shem Yam ve'Eretz, are called sea and dry land. Yamu Malchus k'moshu b'Atzilus. Yam is the Malchut as she exists in Atzilus. Shabanim Shachan Asfiris Tizah. Why is she called Yam? Why is she called sea? Because all the Sefirot of the Ze'er Anpin flow into her. Shalamayla Ma'al Malchus, that are above Malchus. Like it says in the verse, where do we see that the sea has water that's not from the sea? Because it says in the verse, Kol ha'nachalim holchem alayam. How does the ocean become an ocean? A lot of the ocean has to do with all the rivers of the world flowing into the ocean. Springs and rivers, all the pathways of the water go to the sea. Kol ha'nachalim holchem alayam. All the streams go to the sea. What does that spiritually mean? The streams represent the higher Sefirot. The Chesed, the Gevurah, the Tiferet, they're all flowing down into Malchut. What does Malchus do? Val Yadesha Malchus mekabeles. Malchus now receives the koineses betocha, and she gathers into herself as a sfiroi shalomayla mamena, all the sfirot that are above her. Himalemes aleim. Malchus is not just a spigot that you pour, when you want to pour from a big pitcher through, you take a thin thing and you pour it through. Malchus is not just a passover that just passes something through like a pipe. Malchus changes whatever goes into her. She resets it and reforms it that it shouldn't be so intense. What should come out on the other side is much, much, much lighter godliness. Because the lights that are coming into Malchus don't tolerate anything but God. Don't tolerate the thought of any existence other than Hashem. Malchus has to stop that because Malchus means kingship. You can't be a king if it's only God. So Malchus says, excuse me, God, you got to stop now. Got to stop pushing yourself onto everything. You got to restrain yourself. Malchus has to say this to God. Malchus is the Shekhinah that has to speak to her husband and say, you can't be so assertive. You got to let others live. Okay, so therefore when Malchus receives all the input, she needs to completely take it and dramatically reduce those energies. She acts as an incredible how do you call it in electricity? Something that reduces the energy tremendously. A transformer. She transforms it, changes it. That's what he's saying. As she takes the energies into her, himalemes aleim, she hides it. Kedugmas hayam, just like the sea, shu machasa al masha b'taycha. Just like the sea covers everything that's in it. Through that, it's almost like in the river, you can still see the fish swimming. If you look at a river, because the river is not so deep, in the rivers, you can see what's going on. But in the sea, the ocean is dark from the top, unless you go in. Then Malchus transitions and reduces herself to become a source to the creations. That's the earth of Malchus. Like it says in creation, when God created the world, what does it say? Which is the Malchut element of God that was creating. What does it say in Genesis? Let the earth give forth vegetation. Let the earth swarm with let the earth produce life. Why does it blame everything on the earth? Because the earth is the Shekhinah, is the Malchut that's creating. Tachei haaretz, toitzei haaretz. Let the earth give. Okay, that's the idea. Now, this is all the regular, this is usually how there's sea and there's dry land. But there is a special occasion. What's the special occasion? when Yonatan talks to David. What's that? That's when it's not going to be business as usual. That's when there's going to be an extraordinary moment when the hidden world of the sea is going to come into the dry land. There's going to be a massive download when all secrets will be exposed. Like we discussed last night, how during the time of when they went through the sea, they had an incredible otherworldly experience. They saw everything. This was last night's class. We discussed it. So the inyan of Lo Yonason and the idea of Yonason speaking to David, who ke'inyan is like the idea of a hafach yam leyabasha, that sea is converted to dry land. Shahaya bekriyas yamsav, that was at the kriyas yamsav. Hainu, what does that mean? The nois savlam shachas amalchus kamay shehi ba'atzilus. In addition to the drawing forth of Malchus. As Malchus is an Atzilus, Nosan Hayachroina, Shenimshacha b'b'chenas Malchus, but now further, it was drawn down into Malchus, Kamoshi Mekar Libya. In Yonasan itself, you have already everything flowing in. Yonatan itself means Yud Kevav, all the rivers flowing into the sea. That's Yonasan. Yonasan speaking to David is not an everyday occurrence. That's a moment when the sea splits or the sea is converted to dry land. The concealed worlds of Malchus and Atzilus was torn open. And the lights of the Sefirot of the world of Atzilus, Sheba Malchus, that are in Malchus, as they are in their own, were now transmitted into the lower worlds. And it's a miracle that the lower worlds did not explode. That's the idea. What time is it? Should we finish Siv Beis? Now, last paragraph for tonight. And he continues in the discourse. After David, now again, Yonatan is speaking to David. According to this, it doesn't make a difference what he said. The mere idea that Yonasan is speaking to David, that's already the whole thing. It means that the lights of Atzilus, the lights of the Ein Sof that are only above the world, were transmitted to David, which means were transmitted to David, which is the Shekhinah, as she's a source for creation, which means we're downloaded into the creation. Who cares what he said? Doesn't make a difference. Vayomer Lo Yonason. That Yonasan says to David. That's it. Oh, so now he continues in the discourse. Oh, but what did he tell him? So what did he tell him? After David received this transmission, so again, the transmission is seen as an empowerment. Now, the Malchut of Atzilus communicates to the Malchut, the Shekhinah, and gives her a job. And she says, now that you have all this incredible empowerment, you have this incredible light, go down, 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 and sit by that rock. Hide by that rock. You think you're privy to all these lights, so you should sit there and enjoy the great divine radiance that's coming upon you, David? You think I'm now giving you the gift of a higher consciousness, that you're finally, David, able to lift up from your constricted worldview and experience so that you can sit there and kvel in the light? Not at all. I'm giving you all this light so you should be empowered to go down into the darkest places of the universe, into the harshest and most concealed places, and fix the darkest places. In other words, every time there's a gift given from above, it comes with a responsibility. The Rebbe would always say to people who would come to the Rebbe, and there were times where the Rebbe says, when someone asked the Rebbe the Rebbe should give shirayim. Other Rebbes, other tzaddikim would give shirayim. Shirayim means they would eat and they would give them the leftover foods. So someone once said to the Rebbe, I want shirayim from you. So the Rebbe says, my shirayim comes with responsibility. I don't know if you want. If I give you shirayim, if I give you my energy, then you're not going to sit there and indulge in it. You're going to be made responsible. So that's exactly what the Malchut of Atzilus says that's what Yonason says to David. And you know what? And the responsibility is not going to be in Gan Eden. I'm sending you down to Gehenna. In other words, I'm sending you down far, far away where you don't want to go. I'm sending you on Shlichus. If I'm going to give you everything, but I'm sending you on Shlichus. Far off. And that's what he says. As Amar Lo, he says to him, look at these words. Vishalashta teirad ma'oid. What did we say in the initial story? What does this mean? Vishalashta means spend 3 days. Teirad ma'oid and lay low. Don't be hidden. The deeper meaning is Vishilashta means Hushetase Tiyasa B'china Segel. Vishilashta means you should become 3. It doesn't say wait 3 days. According to the deeper meaning, it fits so much more with the words. You should become 3. What does that mean? We know that in the vowels of the alphabet, the nekudot, how they're called, how they are, how do we know how to pronounce, the Hebrew alphabet? There are these dots, nekudos, we call them. Amongst them, there is a kamatz, there is a pasach, there's a tzere, there's a segol. The segol produces the sound eh. So when you have a segol under an aleph, it's eh. When you have a patach under an aleph, it's ah. Okay, that's how you know how to pronounce it. It's the way Hebrew works. Fine. But we know that these nekudot are divine. They're godly, and they're symbolic for great, very great things. The way the nekuda of segol looks like is it's 3 dots. 2 dots, and then 1 dot below it. It's a triangle. 2 dots, and then a dot below it. And what does that represent? So what is Yonason saying to David? Now that you received this extra infusion, Vishilashta, you should become a segol. That's your job. What does that mean? Segol means that the Malchut, which is 1 dot, Malchut is a dot like the moon, a dot, or goes low, 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 beneath everything, and creeps up from the bottom. What's the 2 dots? The 2 dots represent everything in the world, because everything in the world comes from Chesed and Gevurah, from the 2 primary energies. So therefore, it represents all of existence, and also this two also represents plural, the pluralism of the world. The oneness means that the oneness of God, the truth of oneness of God, has to creep under the 2 to lift them up. That means, in our own lives, it would mean our neshama, our soul, that is above the world, that is a being of oneness, has to go down in a world of multiplicity, to go down in a body where there's Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara, where there's a good inclination and a bad inclination, into the duality of the world, and to deal with and bring the oneness from below. But the only way you can go and lift something, today when I was driving by at the corner over here, they're building this new school over here, and they're putting these major cement blocks. So there was a forklift over there, and that was a little scary because I'm in the car and I'm hoping that this tractor is going to hold these bricks well. So you see how the guy is maneuvering the whatever that and he lowers the thing down and he goes the bottom with the long, sticks it under, and from there he's lifting him up. So to lift something up, you have to go under it, beneath it. Like to lift up, if you want to lift something up, you lift it on your back. You put your head under it. That's how you're lifting it. It's basically the concept that the Malchut has to descend down into the darkness of creation, and even where God is being denied, and even where there is resistance, and even where there's unholiness, the Shekhinah has to go down to deal with everything, to rectify the darkness. Well, she doesn't want to go. But she's told, listen here, I empowered you now. Now you go down. It's like a lot of times, there's people who have different opinions and they're resistant, and we don't want to deal with them. We'd rather stay amongst our own company, people who agree with us. Instead of going down and I have to get dirty, I have to get into an argument, I have to experience resistance. I don't want to have to deal with such kind of Jews. I don't want to deal with such kind of people I don't want to deal with the Gentile. I want to stay in my own secluded corner. So becoming a segel means, but you know what happens? He's going to say in a moment. And that's the meaning of wait. Vishilashta, you should become a segel. And therefore, tered, you're going to go down. Ma'od, a lot. He's telling David, King David, which is the Shekhinah, you're going to go down, down, down. How far should you go? The Yoshavta, you should sit. Eitzel Even Azel, by the stone, which is the material world. See, there's a lot of spiritual worlds which are also part of the darkness. The spiritual worlds are not dark enough. You have to go down all the way into the Even Azel, into the physical. That's the place that you are hiding beyond Hamaisen, the day of action, which is Olam Asiyah, which is the material physical world. All the way over there, you have to descend. It's the idea that the Shekhinah has to go all the way into exile. It's the idea that the Jewish people can't remain in Israel, have to be scattered amongst the nations. See, all these are all the same concept. It's to go down, down, down very low. But here's what happens. What's gonna happen? But there's got to be a prize. What's the prize? A segel has another shape, where the segel flips over, and that's called a segulta. A segel is like this. A segulta is the two dots are on the bottom, and the one dot is on the top. So what does that mean? When the soul and when the powers of holiness go down into the pluralistic world, into the world of contradictions, into the world of duality, into the world of conflict, into the world of concealment, to deal ultimately, as we spoke many times, the sparks of holiness to something. And these things lift the soul up to unimaginable heights, much higher. And that's why God says to the Jewish people, V'yisem li segula, you will be my cherished people, mikala amim, from all the nations. Simply means you will be my cherished people from the nations. It's a simple meaning. From amongst the nations, you will be my cherished people. Here's a much deeper meaning. V'yisem li segula, you will become cherished, you will become a segulta. You will rise up high, mikala amim, from your engagement with the nations, from your engagement with those who don't agree with you, from your engagement those who fight you, the engagement with those of unholy elements in the world. From there itself, you will be segula. Me means from, not just from amongst, but from them itself, they will lift you up to the highest heights. I know it's a temporary descent, God says, but in the end you will ascend. And this is the message that Yonason says to David. You have to descend. This is all what the Rebbe Maharash says in that discourse. Okay. You should become a segel. That has 3 nekudos. It indicates alavodas habirurim. Avodas habirurim means the service of purifying the world, rectifying. Now this is where he's beginning to connect it to Sefirot HaOmer. See, this is what the discourse is going to be. Because Sefirot HaOmer, this period of time is when we go down to deal with our darker side, with our emotions that are not yet cleansed, that are not yet purified, with our animal soul. It's all about this purification. Hainu Yerida Samalchus, which in general represents the Yerida, the descent of the Malchut, Lamata below Levarer Birurim, to purify, to refine refinements. While Yedei Zen, through this, Yeh Vishalashta, you will become tripled. Pchinas Segulta, you will become a Segul. Shegam Besegulta Yesh Gimel Nekudais. A Segulta also has 3 dots. Pchinas Segula, you'll become Segula. Like it says, V'yisam li segula, you will be segula mikola amim, from all the nations. So again, the word vishilashta has 2 meanings. Vishilashta means initially you have to become a segul. Teired ma'oid, you will go down. But vishilashta also means you will become a segulta. It's the same like ipaked and v'nivkadata. That has 2 opposite meanings. So the vishilashta means the lowering of yourself, your absence, your nullification, your descent into darkness. Is vishilashta becoming a segel, but vishilashta also means you'll eventually become triple in the sense that you will go up. So he says this is the idea, the same idea, like it says, v'yisam li segula mikola amim, dal yedei abir shemevared mikola amim, through all the spoils, the sparks of holiness that are extracted from the nations. This is going to elevate you much higher. Okay. This is the idea. So now the Rebbe asks, and with this question we're going to end today's class. Now the question is, it's not a question. He's just giving a commentary. He says, this that Yonason says to David, Vishilashta tered ma'oid, shal yedeya yerida lepchina segol, through the descent to the level of segol, levarer berurim, to rectify the lower elements of creation. Yis'ala lepchina segulta of a segula, you will be elevated to become high, a segulta and a segol. Isn't that the same idea of v'nifkadeta ki yapakid mashavech? He says the same idea. What's v'nifkadeta? You're going to become apt, you're going to be remembered, and you're going to have a unity. It means you're going to rise really high. Because of what? V'nifkadeta, because of your vacancy, because of your nullification. So it rings the same bell, no? It's the same idea. Through a descent will come an ascent. Through a non-being will come in a being. It's the same idea. In general, it's the same idea. In this that he said to him in the beginning, so Yonason says to David, tomorrow is Chodesh. You will be vacant. Sorry, you will be remembered because your seat will be empty and vacant. And then he says to him, Vishilash. So what is Vishilash Tered Ma'oid? What is that saying? If it's already said earlier, he's giving him more detail. He's basically saying, when I'm asking you to abnegate yourself, I'm asking you to surrender yourself completely, to go down to fix the darkest things in the world. That's the ultimate surrender. The ultimate surrender is that we are pushed out of the palace to go sweep to go sweep the, what did you call it? The slums. When you send the prince to go sweep the slums, there's no greater surrender and humility on the prince's end. So that's what Hashem is now, that's what Yonason is telling David. I asked you to abnegate, but I want to explain what I mean. Vishilashta, you're going to become a segel, you're going to go down, tered ma'oid, go down very low. That's what he explains over here. Through this, that your seat will be vacant. You read the vester, descent and concealment. Even if kadata, you're going to have the highest elevation. First, he said to him the idea in general. Then he adds and he gives him explanation. Both. Number one, regarding the descent. What do I expect of you? I expect of you v'shilashta to go down, tered ma'oid, very, very low. V'yashafta eitzel even ha'ozel, you should sit next to the stone, which represents hayarida ba'olam ha'asiyah, the descent all the way down into the material physical world. V'hein b'negei aliyah, and also regarding the elevation, shal yadeya yarida v'shilashta, through the yarida v'shilashta, you're going to go down. V'shilashta means you're going down. Sheyis'ala, you're elevated. L'pchina segulta v'segula, to very, very high. It's going to lift you up to the highest levels. So basically in these two verses, you have an empowerment and an idea about the importance of our investment into life to bring enlightenment, to affect our environment, to shine our lights, even if sometimes we feel that's a compromise on our own gains and our own development. What is most important to God is that godly consciousness should illuminate the darkest places. Now we hold it at chapter 3. And we're going to start weaving together all these ideas, and as we're going to see, Be'ezrat Hashem, no one should forget anything we learned tonight. I want to come back next week and start right without any reviews. Hold it right where it is, and then from there we're gonna take it further. 2:47, almost 3 hours. That's not bad. We need to understand. We haven't even begun to understand what's going on over here. I would say this is probably going to... Yes. It deserves to be loved.